Hello and good morning, everyone. I am the moderator for this session and also pleased to be one of the co-presenters. This is IC 37, you're in the right place, Dominican Republic Wheelchair Sector Policies and Practice, Successes, Challenges, and Opportunities. I am Mary Goldberg, and I'm also pleased to be presenting with Alba Polanco. Our colleague Maria Toro-Hernández is not with us for this session, but was critical in bringing this work to fruition and also helping us prepare for this session. We'd like to welcome you by inviting you to please share in chat where you are from, your primary occupation, and any prior work experience with the Dominican Republic. So please go ahead and do that. And of course, like the previous sessions, we ask that you stay on mute, and there will be a question and answer section at the end, as well as some opportunity for discussion throughout the presentation. Welcome, Ariba. Ariba is one of our students at Pitt from Massachusetts, learning about rehabilitation technology. Perry Lowe, welcome. Perry is a business owner, managed factories there years ago in Dominican Republic, not too much experience recently. Krithika, welcome, our colleague from India. She is the ISWP Research and Training Coordinator. She is very key in this project and many of our training initiatives. And Sammy, an occupational therapist who is retired. How wonderful. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I think we can go ahead and get started, Alba, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Mary said, my name is Alba Polanco, and I'm really happy to be here sharing with you what we have done in Dominican Republic the last few years. First of all, we would like to share with you what are the learning objectives of this session. At the end, we would like you to be able to describe 3 major recent positive policy changes in the Dominican Republic wheelchair sector that you relate the DR wheelchair sector current opportunities with those in your context, and that you can identify one area for potential rapid and sustainable wheelchair sector development in the DR. We are eager to listen to your thoughts and suggestions about all this process. And to lead this session, we will review some general context, we will share the wheelchair-related background, and we will explain recent policies in DR, concluding with some future work ideas. And well, that's it. Let's begin. I will show you the context. And myself, I'm from Dominican Republic. You probably know us from Punta Cana, the tourism, the beautiful beaches. And we are located in the Caribbean, and we share an island with Haiti called La Española. And we're mostly surrounded by water. And this is really important for us when we are talking about wheelchair sector, because in my experience, one of the major concerns that we get about wheelchairs are related to salinity, humidity, and also, of course, unpaved pavements. That's another subject I'm talking about later. But besides that, I mean, it's important to mention that we are an island, and we have around 23% people living in poverty and around 3% living in extreme poverty, where people with disability are overrepresented. Minimum wage in Dominican Republic is around $241 monthly, and we have a population of 10.7 million people, and that was from the census in 2010. The census was supposed to be done in 2020, and you know what happened there. And we have a schedule for this year. We are hoping to get better data regarding disability this year, because we adopted the Washington Group Statistics for Disability data set for the census this year. So that will help us a lot with that information. And it is estimated that more than 400,000 people have a mobility impairment that will mean the need for AT regarding mobility, such as cane, crutches, and wheelchairs. We do have a strong law background regarding rights of people with disability. We ratified the Convention on the Rights of persons with disabilities in 2009. We also ratified the Inter-American Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities in 2001. And we changed our national law in 2013. We had another one from 2000, and we changed it to be in the same path as the CRPD. And this law ensures access to assistive technology and makes the government responsible for this provision. So as you may see, we do have a legal background about AT service provision, including wheelchairs. However, as we will discuss through this session, there are several limitations and opportunities to apply this legal background. Regarding governance, we have two major government agencies that are involved. First, the National Disability Council, CONADIS, where I used to work when we were working on this project, leads and oversees that public policies are inclusive of persons with disabilities. And by law, CONADIS is responsible for final approval of individual AT needs. CONADIS only have office in Santo Domingo. I think that's really important. We have 31 provinces, and Santo Domingo is the capital city. So that also is a limitation to get like access to appropriate AT services. On the other hand, the Ministry of Health is responsible for rehabilitation services. And while it has nationwide coverage, public rehabilitation is really scarce. Like the services from public rehabilitation are really scarce. We don't have an integrated system that guarantee continuity. You might go to a doctor today, to a physician, and then the next week you go to another. I do it myself. We don't have any data continuity regarding this, and that's also kind of a limitation for all this process. Most of rehabilitation services are provided by an NGO called ADR in Spanish. It's the Dominican Association of Rehabilitation. They're also the only wheelchair manufacturer in the DR. So far, we have learned about law and governance, and I'm going to explain you now what we had until 2019 about products and services. The provision of wheelchairs in the Dominican Republic has historically relied on imported wheelchairs. They are either donated by international organizations, they are bought from local vendors to donate to the user, or they can also get buy out of pocket from local vendors, or you can get them through traffic accident funds or job risk related insurance that cover you 100%. The most common wheelchairs provided are standard, like the hospital ones, right? Active, which is a parallel to the US light wheelchair, and the all-terrain that we have, we can import it, or these are the ones that we locally manufacture. And the all-terrain wheelchair is really common in low and middle income countries because they help as a daily use wheelchair for unpaved and inaccessible environments. The major donor here is LDS, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we also have international donors that are the major provider of special wheelchairs, the ones for postural support needs. And we have like 3 organizations that comes every year in different dates. They spend a week in the Dominican Republic usually, and they do training with and 2 professionals in the Dominican Republic. The issue regarding this is that, well, it's not enough. There are like large waiting lists for special wheelchairs, and then there is no follow-up guarantee because the specialists come from other countries and we don't have the capacity here to follow up with these conditions or these needs. Also, this is a legal matter that about importation taxes. Wheelchairs are exempt from importation taxes in the Dominican Republic, also by law, but it's only exempt for NGOs, people with disabilities, and companies led by people with disabilities. That means that if you're going to get a share out of pocket from a vendor, you don't have exception for the taxes, so if I'm a person with disability, I will need to buy it through a web page or through another importation process directly, and that will be, of course, more effort for me. At that time, or at this time as well, we don't have guidelines license standards for products or services, and or even if it's local or international. So this is a broad context of products and services in Dominican Republic, and this is an example of our locally manufactured wheelchair that, as I said, is manufactured by ADR. And regarding personnel, well, less than 100 professionals involved in service provision have received basic training, and less than 20 intermediate as defined by the World Health Organization. However, there's no guidelines for provision, and most of them are located also in the capital city or in Santiago, that is the second major city in the art. Oh, regarding provision as well, I need to say that since 2016, we have developed a whole week workshops, whole week long workshops. Thank you for your patience with my English. And these independent living workshops for people with disabilities show them how to use the wheelchairs. They could also get a wheelchair through this process, but it's not specifically for that. We spent a whole week, and it's a peer-led workshop where they share their experiences and how to use the wheelchair, how to do a wheelie, how to roll, how to fall from the wheelchair and you know, and don't die while you fall. So what we did in 2019 regarding personal is that we created this independent living workshops for rehabilitation professionals. We have more than 80 professionals, including PT, OT, nurses, and physicians, and we train them in these abilities. For that, we got the help from Vida Independiente Foundation in Mexico, and we got 4 professionals from there, and they also got classes and sessions regarding techniques to focus on independence when they are like doing their interventions. Another important information about our capacity is that we only have 2 universities that offer either PT or OT. That means that they have rehabilitation schools. One is located in Santo Domingo and the other one in Santiago. They only teach about 80 in one class and about wheelchair inside that class. So as you may see, and we also gather when we did in 2019 the workshops, they don't have like for any kind of formation in wheelchair or OT when they study in the university rehabilitation. Also, I need to mention that these 2 universities are private, and this also limits the option for a lot of people to study. One of the main issues that we have also is that even if the Ministry of Health has some spaces in the country where you can go ahead and have a rehabilitation center, a public rehabilitation center, and they have the equipment and everything, there is no personnel in those cities because we have a lack of personnel for physical or occupational therapy. So that's pretty much the context. These are some pictures from the workshops in 2019 that we had their occupational therapists from all the country and also physical therapists. And then something happened. We were waiting for years for the National Social Security Council to approve the inclusion of wheelchairs in the health system, in the social security system, right? And it finally happened in 2019, and that changed everything for us because we saw this as an opportunity to tackle all the challenges that we had at that moment, as I described right now. So with a resolution, the National Social Security Council approved the inclusion of manual wheelchairs, pressure relief cushions, and special strollers for people with permanent disability as certified by CONADIS in all health insurance schemes. By permanent disability in Dominican Republic, it means that you have a certificate that is given to you by CONADIS. It's used for social protection purposes, and it identifies you as a person with disability. And to get this certification, you need to have a long-term health condition approved by a physician. with a physician certificate, and you need to get more than 5% in the World Health Organization Disability Scale, the HUDAS, and with that is done with an interview in CONADIS, you get a certificate. When we talk about all health insurance schemes in Dominican Republic, we are talking about two of them. We have a contributory system that is for people that have formal jobs, that is only like more or less 17% of people with disability, and you need to pay a 20% co-payment. We also have the scheme called subsidized that is for low-income persons and people that live in poverty, and in that case it's only you don't need to pay, and the government covers 100% of the wheelchair or the special stroller or the relief cushion. However, even if you don't need to pay 100%, when you have this kind of health insurance, the access that you have is just to public hospitals, and there are not a lot of services that you can access with this. In these new policies, the funding cap for wheelchairs is around $430. Special strollers are only approved for children with a cerebral palsy diagnosis. And as you may be thinking right now, $430 is not enough to cover a broad variety of manual wheelchairs. And if you need to also pay a 20% of $430 plus the rest of the cost of the wheelchair, is still a lot to pay for people. Also, wheelchairs may be changed in this policy every 5 years or before if authorized by CONADIS. So one of the first things that we did was to specify the criteria to change a wheelchair before the 5 years. And here is one of the moments that we thought about all the water surround us and what reasons people may have to change their wheelchair, because we do have a lot of wheelchair abandoned, and also they get damaged, with the environment. So another steps that we took were regarding product type definition, because the resolution from the council didn't have any definition at all. So we needed to have like the same criteria for all stakeholders, and for this we use help from international professionals. We use also procurement documents from US, and with the local experience we define standard, the active wheelchairs, all-terrain, sport that are also included, and special wheelchairs, also strollers. One thing that we did that was really strategic is that inside of special, we included bariatric chairs. Why? Well, it didn't mention at all bariatric wheelchairs, and we didn't want this option to be not available. We didn't want the insurance company to say, hey, you don't have coverage for bariatric wheelchairs. So what we did in the definitions is that we just added there, so that way we wouldn't have any denial from the insurance regarding people that need bariatric wheelchairs. Also, we held several workshops, around 5 or 6 workshops, to cover all 22 insurance companies that we have in the whole country, the 12 vendors that we also have spread in the country. And we raised awareness in more than 50 people regarding the importance of the appropriate wheelchair, what the assessment process should be, how to fit the chair. These were like 3-hour-long workshops. It's not enough, we know, but at least the objective was to raise awareness and to make sure that they know as stakeholders what is ahead of us and what is needed to be done next. And also that they accept when we say like this is the chair that a person needs, that they do know that it's a whole process, and that is not something that you just go ahead and give someone a chair, because one of the issues that we had with the donations, that is still the major way that a person can get a chair in the Dominican Republic, is that there's no process related to donations, right? Also, it depends on donor stock. And on the other hand, it gives the idea that the wheelchair are charity and not a person's right. And that's something that changed with the resolution in 2019. And we are trying to use that as strategic, as like something to let the people know that it's a right, as our legislation says, to have a wheelchair, and that it should follow an appropriate process. We also define the standard operating procedures that Mary will explain for you. And we consider their waiting times, gateways, and we also consider what happens when a local vendor doesn't have the chair that a person needs and doesn't get that wheelchair on time. I mean, what happens when a person needs to buy a chair by himself, and what happens there is that it just needs to get covered, and that's it if the vendor doesn't get it in approximately a month is what is given. It was also determined that CONADIS would develop a mandatory certification process for vendor personnel to guarantee a proper fit to the user. However, this step is yet to be developed. We still have a lot of challenges, but we have gone so far, and we have also successes. So Mary now is going to explain you the rest of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alba. You can go ahead to the next slide. While she does that, I realized I didn't formally introduce myself. I'm an associate professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and also pleased to co-direct the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals, and that's how we got engaged in this work. So there are two primary ways that a person with a disability or a wheelchair user is able to access a chair. They can either go directly to the insurance company where they request an assessment, and then from there they are turned over to the National Council of Disability for the disability certification process that Alba described. From there, they receive their wheelchair assessment, and then they're directed back to the insurance company, who would authorize the delivery of the wheelchair and then refer them to the vendor for the wheelchair delivery. Alternatively, they can go directly to the National Council of Disability and then follow the same process from there. The little steps that you see in this graphic that are underlined align with the WHO steps. So the referral and appointment stage happens with the insurance company and the National Council of Disability, as well as the assessment. But the procurement, the product preparation, the fitting, and the user training steps are all occurring within the vendor's process. As Alba mentioned, this is a little bit problematic as there's not formal training available typically for that vendor, and the certification in terms of the personnel certification process is still undergoing and under development. You can go to the next slide, please. So users were informed about this new process through newspaper press releases and stakeholder web pages from the National Council of Disability, as well as the insurance affiliates' rights advocates. Alba, we switched to a different view. Thank you. And so this is a picture of an ad that was sent out by the National Social Security Council notifying users of this process and where to go. Go on to the next slide, please. So of course, the provision process is only part of this. Capacity building in terms of the personnel training was required to take this to the next level. So Alba and her team reached out to us at the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals to design a whole capacity building structure where providers would first be trained at the basic level, would pursue their basic wheelchair service provider certification from ISWP, and then later engage in a training of trainers initiative. So this was all designed right before COVID hit. I actually remember that Alba and I first met at the beginning of March. So we were talking about COVID, March 2020, talking about COVID, but it was pre-shutdown. By the time we implemented the training, or I should say the typical training process that we engage in ISWP when we want to scale is a hybrid approach where the trainees would go through, say, 4 weeks of online training followed by an in-person workshop. So we had every intention of bringing in some international trainers to support the in-person component of this workshop. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we were unable to do that, but Alba and her team served as the in-person facilitators and managed the logistics. And we were able to conference in trainers from Spain, from Colombia, and from Argentina. So they were able to go through the hands-on process. 39 out of 40 of the participants that were selected completed the process and pursued their certification. Thank you to Krithika. To learn more about the certification, you can click there. And then a subset of those individuals went on to the training of trainers workshop that we managed in a similar format with online training and then an in-person component. And 10 out of 12 completed that process. We can go on to the next slide. So we know that creative teams can do anything. Alba, I'm not sure if the video will play for you. I was having some issues, but at minimum, you can see here the screenshot of this video is one of the participants engaging in the wheelchair skills training component of the user training section of the training course that they were engaged in. And what's fun about this is a quick photo that Maria Toro took. So from her office in Spain, the Zoom platform, you can see our trainer, Sarah Munera, in the top left-hand corner there, conferencing in from Colombia. Both of them are providing feedback to this trainee. And so this took multiple locations. These were trainers that were in different countries across multiple time zones. Multiple funding sources. I think I forgot to mention on the last slide that this was financed by PAHO, so the WHO affiliate in Latin America. So even amidst COVID, we were able to get this done. Next slide. Thank you. So in addition to the provision process and the training process for personnel, there is also advocacy related to products. So ISO 7176 Part 8 was reviewed by an intersectoral committee led by INDOCAL, who is the local ISO member. At this point, it's just Part 8, so the requirements and test methods for static impact and fatigue strengths. At the moment, the next step is what's called a public survey. And then from here, the Quality Council in the Dominican Republic will also review the standard. And if they approve it, then it comes into law as a national requirement. So that's an exciting step. Next slide, please. So in terms of updates, you can see here in the images, we like to think of this as an under construction process rather than us just being completely halted or, barrier with the fence. So COVID, of course, threw us into a bit of a tailspin. And during that same time, there was also a national election in the Dominican Republic that resulted in a government change. So we've had, unfortunately, limited implementation and follow-up where just one wheelchair to date has been delivered following this process. As I mentioned, the ISO will be adopted soon, but the other parts are not yet scheduled. And the formal training, the capacity building has stopped. Next slide, thank you. So as we mentioned, this will be an interactive session. We'd like you to take the next 3 to 4 minutes. Please get out your pen and paper, or if you're like me and do all your notes digitally, jot something down there and think a little bit about how our context, or the context within the Dominican Republic, relates to yours in terms of provision, products, or policy. So we'll just pause here for the next 3 or 4 minutes to allow you some reflection time. So at this time, we can leave the prompt up, but we'd like you to take what you've jotted down outside of the platform or the computer and drop it into the chat. So take the next minute or so to share some of your reflections in the chat. And then Alba, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. Oh, go back one more, please. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead and press enter, or feel free to voice aloud how your experiences relate to the work that's occurring in the Dominican Republic. Perry suggests that sustained policy initiatives are challenging in an unstable political environment. That's absolutely true. I hope that I'm not speaking out of turn, but Alba actually is as well was able to advance her career and take on another position within the government. And so our key connection to this work in the Dominican Republic has also been not quite as streamlined as it initially was. There's a question from Brett: how much product choice is available to end users, or is it limited? Alba, I'll turn that question to you.
Well, we don't really have a lot of variety of wheelchairs available, and pretty much we try that in the assessment process. They can choose between what is available. We just have the ones that I mentioned, like standard chairs and light wheelchairs, and the option is really limited. That will be the answer to that. I don't know if that answers your questions or is everyone. Yeah. So one of the opportunities of what we would like being here in ISS is to have more options regarding wheelchairs available in the country, to have more contacts regarding that, so the vendors can know all the. In fact, I invited all of them to be here, and because if they go to the exhibitions and they know what wheelchairs are available, that means that we will have more options for the user. Yeah, and also for strollers. A stroller, we usually only get them through the international donors that I mentioned before. We don't have strollers here. When you go to the vendor, it's really not an like an option that is always there. You will need to go ahead and look for it internationally. And you think Karen has the hand up? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Karen. Thanks. Unmute yourself.
Hi, this is a real pleasure to hear. I'm very interested in how to facilitate wheelchair services. We found in Kenya and some countries that if at the very beginning you start by working with a local established medical facility, in our case, they're faith-based hospitals that are 50 or 100 years old quite often, gives more stability because they have lived through multiple governments and so on. And I don't know the situation in the Dominican Republic, but partnering, if there is a mission hospital there, partnering with them because they know how to live and work there. We have faced the same struggle with wheelchairs, and now we're working with Beeline Wheelchairs in Guatemala to investigate a mix between some shipping and some building of local parts, moving toward building locally. I don't know if you have the contact for Beeline wheelchairs, but they make a very, very adaptable product that can be made into everything from a pediatric supportive chair, different versions of it, to a active chair. It's not perfect. There isn't such a thing, but it might be an option that interests you. I hear what you're saying about the disconnect between what the government says they'll do and what actually happens too. That's always difficult. I hope that it becomes more stable for you and you can go forward. Can I ask a question to Mary real quick?
Please, Karen.
When she approached ISWP and you guys helped to set up training partly virtually, was that an option in other places as well? How does that work?
Yes, Karen,
Thank you.
everything is everything is an option. We do have a fee structure for how to support, but we also help to fundraise. So in this case, we were able to join the meetings with PAHO and advocate for the resources to be able to support the training aspect of this. But we also provided some technical support related to the ISO standardization and setting up the provision process. So there was kind of a whole technical assistance package that went into this, Karen. So yeah, we're always happy to engage in conversations like that. Thank you.
Would you be the right person to connect with on that?
Sure, please do.
Awesome. Thank you. Now I got to figure out how to put my hand down. I got it up. Now I got to get it down. Anyway, thank you.
Sure. I think hovering over reactions, maybe you're able to lower it, or if you click on that.
Oh, somebody did for me. Thank you.
Okay, sure. And then Felipe says that it seems that in the end, the dealers are not ready to push new products. Is there another option to bring products into the country? So I know that Alba already mentioned Latter-day Saints Charities that has provided some chairs. Do you want to expand on that, Alba? Are there other mechanisms that you're aware of?
Yeah, with charities or NGOs, you can go ahead and bring chairs because we don't have any limitations around that right now. We are hoping to integrate all of these donations and processes, of course. But if you ally with an NGO, you might be able to get chairs here and do process of delivery wheelchairs. Or also churches with NGO churches and ADR, and sorry about the noise. ADR, the National Dominican Rehabilitation Association, they also partner with these international organizations to deliver the chairs that they don't have. So that might be an option as well. And answering to the comment that was before, since they have all nationwide coverage regarding rehabilitation and they don't change with the government, it's also an option for us to have the process or to organize delivery with them. This is something that we have discussed. I think Mary have it later on. She will mention something about that. And yes, of course, we thought about all the options that we might get, but since we have a law that specifies that CONADIS approve the final individual needs, that is a limitation for us to make sure that happens and it doesn't affect like the process for the user. Where do you need to go and how do you make sure that is a professional rehabilitation or ATP? We don't have ATP here, but how do you make sure that is a proper provision? So it's a challenge that we still have right now.
Thanks, Alba. There are a couple additional comments, one from Sammy about through the work of Eleanor's project importing chairs into Peru, but seeing decreased evaluations. And then Maria commenting about Colombia policies being very different and no regulation on the type of wheelchairs. Perhaps some of you attended Sarah Muñoz's session yesterday about her work in Colombia and some of the efforts that we hope will ultimately change that. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'd be pleased to come back to both of those comments at the conclusion of this session. So Alba, if you could please advance to the next slide. Thank you very much. So this next section is characterized as future work, but much of this is actually already ongoing or has been kickstarted, such as the Assistive Technology Capacity Assessment, which was also resourced by PAHO, so again, the Pan American Health Organization, in conjunction with the Public Health Ministry in the Dominican Republic. And this will provide a high-level picture of the capacity that the country has to regulate, finance, procure, and provide assistive technology. However, the report is not public yet. So we anticipate that there will be recommendations that are in line with what we've already described, but we have yet to see it. There are also care policies that are in place that suggest that access to care is a fundamental human right, especially for people with disabilities, senior citizens, and infants. And provision of AT was included as a part of this pilot. So going beyond wheelchairs, similar to the ATA-C, to all assistive technology. And then this last one is still at the conceptual level, but there have been discussions with a private Catholic university in the Dominican Republic that has a physical therapy program to develop a university-centered service lab. So this would be to provide practice to the students and would also ensure that user training is available for consumers. So the community would also be quite engaged in this activity. Next slide, please. So if we were to design like our ideal system, and some of this has already been mentioned, but we would ensure that technical support was available to develop and implement both product and service standards, perhaps some of those that are offered by ISWP and the new standards that will hopefully and eventually be in ISO. Design of a system that ensures proper procurement, follow-up, and maintenance of products, including both the inclusion of wheelchair provision in the disability certification system and the development of an information system to monitor outcomes over time. Next slide, please. Of course, the user, the end user, the person with the disability needs to be at the center of this process, and so their advocacy is absolutely critical. And we hope to empower users by making sure that they know their rights, they know what constitutes a quality product and a quality service, and that they demand that. And partnerships that facilitate access to users who cannot afford the copayment or need more expensive wheelchairs. Next slide, please. We already mentioned a little bit about what's available on the personnel side, but we hope to continue to strengthen university wheelchair curricula and provide additional training. So going beyond that basic level of training and training of trainers to train kind of the masses of providers in the intermediate level, and then train them up as well as trainers at the intermediate level. So work being done on both sides to try to enhance both the formal professional training as well as continuing education efforts. Next slide, please. So our next discussion section, and we got into some of your suggestions already in terms of collaborating with Beeline Wheelchairs and others, but we'd like you again to please get out your pen and paper and think about what suggestions you may have for potential rapid and sustainable wheelchair sector development in the Dominican Republic. So again, just take a few minutes to jot down your suggestions. Thank you. So similar to before, if you don't mind just dropping your thoughts into the chat, that would be great. Really excited to see. Beeline has a facility in Guatemala. Thank you, Karen. And Perry suggests broad agreement that the pity/charity model of AT finance is ineffective and unsustainable, and that would be a helpful starting point. Thanks, Perry. Do you have specific examples of how you've been able to use that as a point for advocacy and discussions, and any contexts where that has been effective? In the meantime, Maria dropped into the chat, international cooperation projects and reconditioning of discarded wheelchairs to be used by a second person. Yeah, that's an awesome idea. Similarly, if you have any links that you would like to share of NGOs perhaps that are already doing this, or contexts where this is working, would be great. Sammy, I'm curious about the evaluations piece of what you wrote. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself. Has that been facilitated with the assistance of providers internationally through like tele-rehab or consultation or mentorship?
Eleanor's project has been working for about the past 12 years, and then the past 6 years exclusively with one in-country in Peru, one of the poorest sections of Peru, with an agency, a multi-service agency called Yan Kanawasi. And through working with them and alongside of them, doing education and fittings, as well as supplying equipment, we have been able to help them achieve a wheelchair service, as well as nighttime postural care for all of the people who come to that service, to have that nighttime postural care, which we find to be a very important part of maintaining bodies in alignment. And with COVID, what happened was the container with equipment that we sent arrived the same day that Peru went into a 3-month lockdown. However, during the rest of the year, once the 3-month lockdown ended, they were able to, without our help, fit those chairs, set up a follow-up session, also through telehealth and smartphones, do help parents with nighttime postural care, so that one of the most important things for preventing deformities could continue in spite of terrible COVID issues. Peru has lost more people per capita than any other country in the world. But they are plugging along. We've now sent another container this past summer to fulfill both 30 evaluations that they were able to do, as well as a stash of the types of chairs that would be very likely to be needed. Anyway, so we long for being able to go again and work alongside our wonderful Peruvian partners, and I hope to be there before I get too old.
Thank you, Sammy, for sharing that. We agree that the partnership model and building capacity within country is absolutely key. And has Eleanor's project engaged in the training aspects with the local personnel in Peru? Curious about how
Oh,
that.
yes. Oh, yes. I mean, that's what we were doing initially. But then found that because they took the bit in their teeth and they had a good setup to do it, and they had occupational and physical therapy, and an agency that bought into the importance of what we were doing. That it wasn't just putting any wheelchair available into use, but to fit individually to make it's good wheelchair work. So they bought into it, and then when we got back, then I guess a couple of years later, they took away our doing the programs through a translator, and they prepared the parents, and they were doing the training, and they knew what they wanted for us to help them with the more complex problems. So it was, there was a real sense of, we initially drove the bus down there, but then they said, we're going to drive the bus, and you just send us what what else we can't get. It was basically the trade-off, and we released that, but I worry about COVID, and I worry about how much damage is being done to not just individuals and people that we know and love who have lost lives to COVID, as well as terrible increases in poverty, so we just do what we can. We also WhatsApp is wonderful for consults. And we've been doing consults with them.
Thank you, Sammy.
Yeah.
We did the same thing. We kept a WhatsApp channel going for a long time after the training to try to assist with some of the more complex clinical cases and questions that the trainees had.
Yes.
And there's been some discussion in the chat about some kind of a hybrid model where perhaps there is still a charity partner in some way, but that the chairs are specifically included in the health insurance, and then perhaps the charity could assist with the co-payment. And Karen has her hand raised. Do you have something to comment on related to that, Karen, but to close us out? A couple more minutes left.
Yes, that segue is really what Sammy is describing. What they started with is a charity, and now it's moved to more sustainable. And that's also what we've been doing in Kenya. We've also been using a huge amount of WhatsApp and so on, and are beginning to initiate it at some other mission hospitals. But that segue where you don't lose the engagement of people like Sammy and Eleanor, who are looking for the right chairs and getting them there, and then working to make it locally sustainable, I think is key. We can't, because Perry's right, we need to move, but if we just chop, I'm not sure that's too helpful either. So a really thoughtful way to move, exactly as Sammy has said, from coming down and doing everything to training people there, to giving them ownership and looking for a government participation. I think another really good example of that is Shonaquip in South Africa, how they moved from just a charity model into something more complex. And of course, it's not easy, and not all governments are easy to work with. And then there's drawbacks like COVID, and there's always something. But the steady movement from keeping the charity engagement to thoughtful collaboration and building and really listening.
Yes.
Alba, any final thoughts from you to close us out?
Just thank you everyone for your feedbacks and comments. It's been really helpful. Indeed, the political context here is really important to change from a charity model to a right-based model. And even if we do have the legal background to approach this as something sustainable and center in the person and in their rights, it's still a challenge to develop it, right? And to compete with the political interest to keep charities because you get votes with that, or because we are an NGO and we would like to give you shares, and well, that's it. And of course, it's the challenges are just not technical, but political and about the system. So thank you very much for all your feedbacks, and I'm eager to continue working with all of you, with ISWP, sorry, with Mary and their team. And even I'm not in Canales right now, but I'm still working in the country and helping our capacity, even with the universities and the government, to develop this system and make sure that we have an integrated, sustainable wheelchair provision system. So,
Thanks, Alba. We're thankful for your leadership. And the session code, I've dropped it into the chat, is MUTNYE. We're happy to hang out for the next minute or so for any other questions, and also placed our contact information in the chat. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Ariba. Thanks, Karen. Thank you all. Enjoy the conference. Yeah, Lauren, I think you can close it. Thank you so much. Thanks, Alba.
thank you, Mary. Hi, Jonathan. See you, sir. Well,
Hi, nice to see you, Alba. Thanks for the presentation. It's great.
thank you for everything.
Absolutely, Alba. Yeah,
Have a nice conference.
We'll see you around.
Thank you, Mary, for everything.
Thank you. Take good care. Bye.